All right, picking back up. This is where we left last time. And so what I want to try to do now is go from, finish up with Merton and kind of transition into Robert Agnew's general strain theory. I know it's complicated, but try to remember to separate the two. They are similar. Okay, so some things that Merton made us think about. We need to answer these other questions. I mean, yeah, his theory or his ideas may give us some insight into what causes crime or criminality, but there's other things to think about. Like it says here, class isn't the only thing. In essence, poverty isn't the only aspect of it. There's so much more to it than just simply what socioeconomic class someone belongs to. Because there are good and bad people in all socioeconomic statuses. Okay, and you guys can read here. And in essence, not all people are exposed to the same problems. That's true. Some people may be fortunate and not really have that many difficult things to go through. You know, there's some who, unfortunately, whether it be, let's take the socioeconomic part of it out of it for right now. Maybe there are people who've been dealt a difficult hand in terms of, maybe they lost family members, when they were young, if they died, or maybe they just never were part of their lives. Maybe they have a physical or mental difficulty, if they are mentally challenged in some way, have mental health concerns. Physically, they, once again, might have some type of disability to deal with. But those are all things that can impact someone's way they view life and different options they have and what sort of means they have to reach those goals, right? So, and you have people who don't always perceive things the same way. You have, I always think about the different twins that I know. They grow up in the same home. And I know multiple sets of twins, but they all grow up in the same home. They, in essence, experience the same things in life, but some of them choose to do different things. I mean, I know twins that, one of them may have gotten into a lot of trouble, whether it be through, drug usage or just general criminal behavior, lack of respect for any authority, whereas the other twin uh, ends up being different. And even I know some that have chosen law enforcement, for instance, as opposed to their twin who has been arrested and has been in jail multiple times. In some cases, they've been incarcerated. So that's just an example there. And you can perceive incidents as a problem, whereas someone else may not. That's pretty self-explanatory. So moving on, though, I want to go ahead and talk about what other factors actually impact um, someone's life or strain and stress they feel outside, or what are some things that impact a person outside of socioeconomics. And even though it's not the biggest issue, there is the idea and think about race, and it's more so a cultural difference, not necessarily straight up difference in skin color, right? So it's cultural side of that. Education of the offender and family, basically those who are less educated, in lots of realms, not just academia, but lots of realms, tend to struggle more with crime. Okay, uh, poor decision making, things like that. Their critical thinking skills are lacking, as well as their judgment. So, the culture that one lives in or is a part of, those are all factors that go into it. What's acceptable in one culture is not acceptable in another. That's just and that's not just bigger cultures like different religions in different countries or whatever. You have that, right here in the state of Indiana. You have a great number of cultures based on maybe its population of a given city or town. Just the overall makeup of it. What are the job opportunities in that area? What are and as far as jobs are concerned, what types of jobs are there? I mean, are they industrial based jobs? Are they manual labor type jobs? Are they more of your, even the different tech jobs you might have? So all that plays a role. So moving forward, though, one thing I did want to point out, and I've somewhat alluded to it, is that so many people want to try to break things down by, race, for instance. And honestly, race, as it states here, crime rates are less affected by race than uneven help or perceived difference of help. And by that, I mean, these are things you can look at later on your own time. But basically, structural meaning is are there social institutions in place to help individuals? That's all it is. That's the structural side of it. How is your community structured? Individuals, how does someone handle any type of difficulty or trying time or tribulation, in their life? That's another factor that you have to take into it. Not just what does culture do, but what does the individual do? Some people do not handle stress very well. Some people have high anxiety about different things. It's just a number of different things that everybody deals with differently. So and by saying, well, everybody, kind of like Merton's saying, broad strokes, that doesn't necessarily work on the individual side of it. So moving forward, I want to talk a little bit more about Robert Agnew. Sorry about that. Robert Agnew had his general strain theory. So yes, I know it's going to be a little bit strange talking about Merton's strain theory and then Agnew's general strain theory, but think about it in this way. Merton thought it was mostly materialistic, so focused on that a lot, whereas Robert Agnew said there are a lot of general things that, or at least there's strain in general from all these multiple factors. It's multifaceted. It's not just socioeconomics. It's not just the idea of what material things. It's more so, like I said, as you can read here, a failure to achieve material goals set by society is not the only source of strain and criminal behavior. It's more about feeling like we're being treated differently than what we want. Whether or not we really are being treated differently, it's about perception. And it's am I getting my what I deserve? And it's not like, oh, well, I deserve everything. No, it's simply saying, do I feel like I'm treated the way I would want or like to be treated? And all that impacts, how I choose to interact with the world around me. So, like I said here, it's going to be perceived or personal. So I'm going to go ahead and put some of these up here. So examples include failure to achieve valued goals. For instance, I wanted to save up enough money to buy a flat screen TV, and lo and behold, I can't do that for different reasons, whether it be something happened to my car, I need to get it worked on, or I lost the job, or you name it, a number of different things. So instead of continuing to work on finding a job or finding a way to save that money for that flat screen TV, say it's one of these at Walmart that's on sale right now. It's like a 70-inch you can buy for about $500. If it was something like that, instead of trying to find a way to reach it legitimately, it's basically like saying, okay, I'm going to steal it instead. Okay, so there's that. Removal of valued stimuli basically means things like loss of a loved one, loss of a job. That's kind of what it's saying. And you don't feel like it's fair, whether the person blames, like say it's a loved one that dies due to, heart complications. Instead of just learning how to deal with that loss, which is going to be difficult, they want to blame other situations such as the doctors, medical personnel that are working on that family member. They may want to blame, the place where their individual, their loved one worked for a while, because they think it contributed to, whether it be directly to it or the stress of that job, put them in situations to where they had heart complications, or even made them decide to start smoking, for instance, and end up getting some other health issues such as emphysema or something like that. But it's always the idea of how things are perceived and whether you are in essence victimized or allow yourself to be considered victimized, and how you choose to react to that. And ultimately it says down here, it says presentation of negative stimuli, meaning abuse, victimization, verbal threats. Here's another example. And I was fortunate enough never to be a victim of what I consider abuse. I mean, I was disciplined as a child, but I didn't call it abuse. But there are people out there who've legitimately been victims of abuse. And here is the thing that that some people are able to move beyond that and to grow as people and to learn to deal with that and overcome it. And some of them succumb to the idea of, oh, well, I was abused, which is bad, but I'm going to let that define me. That's basically what they get at, and then they use that as their excuse to commit whatever acts they choose to commit or whatever behavior they choose to elicit. That is the big aspect there. Once again, not money, not anything else. It's how you are perceived to be treated. And it's almost like a delayed fight or flight response that we have. That's essentially what Robert Agnew was saying. And I'm going to move on ahead here. And yeah, he did say, Agnew was talking about perceived personal treatments leads to things like frustration, anger, and depression. And all of those ultimately can lead to criminal or deviant behavior. I mean, if you're frustrated or angry with someone, you may lash out at that person, whether it's justified or not. Also, depression causes you ultimately to feel that same thought of cynicism we talked about before. It also makes you feel kind of helpless or apathetic about life, so you may be more apt to do something wrong. For example, real quick, we have a lot of your active shooters or individuals who have, say, bombings, but in essence, mass killings. Those types of incidents tend to be performed by people who, for one, have some form of mental health issue that hasn't been addressed or isn't being addressed properly. And the other side to it is they have had something in their lives that has reached what we're talking about here with this, frustration leading to anger or even depression. Those feelings get stirred up enough and they kind of fester in those within those people, and they end up not choosing to control those thoughts and desires, and that's what leads them to do some of the heinous acts, such as, like I said, Sandy Hook, Las Vegas, Sutherland Church shooting, you name it. There's all kinds of. Unfortunately, it happens fairly often, or at least it's reported fairly often anymore. It doesn't happen much more than it used to, but it does happen some. Okay, so I'm going to. These are some examples that I gave earlier, so you can look at those on your own time. But I do want to do a real quick summary. I know that was real quick. If you guys have questions, feel free to ask me. But Agnew's is pretty simple, so I'm going to try to cut it short here or speed it up a little bit. So summary, like I said, general responses to strain are fear, anger, and depression. Okay. And then ultimately what it says here, if someone harasses me or I feel like they are harassing me or doing me wrong by not hiring me, whatever, that leads to anger, and that anger leads to more of a feeling of revenge. Okay. And revenge leads to aggressive behavior. So if you mistreat me, whether it be real or perceived, I get, a lot of people will get that initial feeling of, oh, I want to get revenge on them. As in, maybe a small amount of revenge, but, I'm not going to be their buddy, whatever. I'm going to have a negative viewpoint of them. Ultimately, if that continues to fester, it grows into aggressive behavior towards that individual or that group. And then ultimately it becomes a criminal act.